and I've been in the ag group there at Norfolk Southern since 1987. Seen a lot of things happen and a lot of transition that's gone on over time. We've got a really good program here today, a good panel. I'm not going to introduce each of the individuals as we move because in the interest of time, just to kind of keep things flowing, we won't do that. First of all, talk about transportation. What vehicles do we use to move all of these products around? It's interesting. Come on front. Barges moving on the Mississippi and inland waterway system. A lot of bulk commodities move that way. Not a lot of packaged products, not a lot of finished goods, but bulk commodities predominantly. Then rail cars, covered hopper cars, second to the top. It's a specialty car. It doesn't haul stone. It doesn't haul wood chips. It's a grain car. We own about 2,500 of those. Each railroad has its own fleet. They're basically assigned in grain and grain product service and don't move back and forth tremendously between different product groups. The box cars, I think we'll notice it here. Here's a box car. It's a standard 50-foot box car used for packaged products predominantly. Also in the aspect that we have refrigerated goods, that's a vehicle that Dee Dee might be interested in at Destiny Organics, moving fresh produce and frozen products from the West Coast or within the United States. It's a specialty car. It's not, we don't own them. They're owned by private companies. The western roads own some cars, but the eastern roads predominantly don't own the refrigerated cars. Tank cars moving liquid commodities such as soybean oil, ethanol, high fructose corn syrup, just to name a few. That's a type vehicle that Josh and the Cargill folks would be interested in. Again, it's a specialty car. Carriers don't own those cars. They're privately owned. They're called privately owned or leased tank cars. Most of them are new generation. I would guess Josh is a 30,000-gallon tank, and that's pretty much the standard. That's the workhorse tank car now. Showing pipelines here. That has nothing to do with inland transportation except pipelines transport diesel fuel and gasoline that fuels everything that we all do. And without that pipeline, the cost of transportation of fossil fuels would be dramatically higher. And I was in the southeast down at Raleigh, North Carolina a couple years ago, and here comes a farmer in, beat-up pickup truck, 5-gallon buckets in the back of the truck with soybeans in it. So people still do haul soybeans to market in a farm truck. I've pictured here a little bit nicer truck, a little better than what I saw, but I would have to say I didn't see that in Raleigh, but with all the new John Deere tractors, Donnie, I see out in the countryside, there's probably new pickup trucks hauling soybeans to plants now too. So, and then containers and bulk commodities on our two ocean-going vessels. It's an emerging market, something we're seeing a lot more of, and I'll speak about that here shortly. Then a coal train. What's a coal train got to do with agribusiness? Electricity, crude oil, fuel, and natural gas are three components of the agribusiness cycle that none of us can do without. So reliable, affordable coal utility is important to the whole agribusiness industry, as is fossil fuel to move the products from around it in the countryside. I want to talk a little bit about some outside influences that have impacts on agribusiness. This case example takes us back into May of 2007. It's a price chart. A little busy, but I'll give you some examples of what's in there. On May 5th of 2007, corn was $3.81 a bushel. May 5th this year, it was $7.12. Wheat was $4.82. Now it went to $7.92 on May 5th of 2008, back to $7.23. Soybeans went from $7.33 in 2007, $13.31 a bushel on May 5th of this year. Wow. That's almost $6 a bushel increase in the commodity price. It was driven by the huge run-up in wheat in May of 2007, the result of about 3 years of reduced plantings of wheat. Prices were, usage was up, supply was down. That was a reaction to the supply and demand fundamental. At that time, between the 07 and the 08, we had these huge increases in commodity prices. Acres were being bought by wheat. Corn and soybeans went up proportionally because we have a finite land mass, so they were fighting for acres. That's why we've got the prices that we have today predominantly. The extreme volatility you see here, after we get through the 08, this volatility in here, it's funds and investment bankers. It's not a reaction to fundamental supply and demand. And I will tell you that if you look back at CBOT values and futures markets, only about 1% of all the contracts traded on a CBOT right now result in somebody taking ownership of goods. It's a financial market. People moved out of other investments, real estate, into commodities. They want to own something hard that they can see, they can touch, they can trade. And a lot of it is program trading without that fundamental result. Oh, back. Go back. Okay. Another outside influence. Corn prices went up in 07. None of our end users, we call them feed mills, producers, anticipated that the prices would stay up. They kept going up. Said, this hasn't happened. It's not fundamental. It's not a supply and demand fundamental. We have plenty of corn. We have plenty of soybeans. We're not going to hedge. So they didn't hedge their prices, didn't hedge their products. All of a sudden, they got into 07 and 08 unhedged. We had two major bankruptcies in 08 that were a result of this corn price run-up. Number one was the Verisun bankruptcy in November, big ethanol company. The second was in December, Pilgrim's Pride, one of the largest poultry companies in the country, declared bankruptcy because they had unpriced contracts and the price of corn just outstripped their ability to recover it in the price of their product. How this affects transportation and agribusiness transportation? Because of these bankruptcies and because of this price run-up, most of the shippers now require payment ahead of time before they ship a car or a train. And with this corn price point now, a corn train is worth about $2.2 million. So they have to wire transfer money or pay for it up front. If they don't have the money, the customer doesn't have the money, they don't submit a bill of lading. We're sitting there with 3 engines valued at about $7.5 million, 75 cars that are $70,000 apiece. Can't move them because they won't submit billing because they have not been paid. That's a direct impact on transportation and how it affects carriers, it affects the shipper. He hasn't been paid for his corn yet. He's waiting before it gets delivered before he can pay. The other thing it impacted was the actual end user, because before folks went to wire transfer, they were being allowed to pay for the corn after it arrived. So they potentially had 3 trains worth of corn in transit or in somewhere in that pipeline. With this, the accounts payable cycle to an end user condensed from 14 days to 2 within the span of a week. That's a huge impact on folks in terms of economics. Credit and money supply. High commodity prices right now, $13.31 soybeans I'm talking about, 55,000 ton vessel loaded out of Norfolk or New Orleans to go overseas. The commodity value of that vessel is $26.8 million, just for one boat. A lot of countries don't have that kind of money. The end users in that country don't have a lot of money. We are seeing a number of folks wanting to switch into, we call them a grocery boat, a smaller vessel, 3-hold, 4-hold, load a little wheat, little soybeans, little corn, little soybean meal. You don't have so much product cost involved in loading of a vessel. It's changing the dynamic of some of the ocean shipping. The other is reloading of ocean containers. We mentioned it a little bit in the meeting this morning, but we have 14 stations now across the railroad that are reloading these ocean containers that come in through the Port of Savannah, the Port of Norfolk, and the Port of Charleston. They go inland or to a DC, they discharge their cargo, they come back. There's a ready vehicle there to put something in it, load it on the boat, and take it back home. So you're getting a reload, but we're also changing the dynamic of how grain and grain products move. You can buy that container 20 tons, or you can buy a 55,000-ton boat. That container is a whole lot cheaper. Most of the countries that some of this stuff is going to don't have the port infrastructure, don't have the inland infrastructure to disappear a 55,000-ton vessel. So it goes over there, it's paid for, it rots before it ever gets inland to be used. They can move containers, they can move the smaller vessel sizes. And then the last outside influence is crude oil and international politics. Crude oil is affected dramatically by the international politics, as is our ability as a country to supply product to foreign countries. And Bruce, this affects Purdue at times with chicken. The U.S. put a tariff on rubber tires for vehicles against China. China's reaction was, we don't want your dark meat, we don't want your chicken paws. So every poultry producer in the United States was impacted by an outside influence that they have no control over, which was a tariff imposed by us against the Chinese tires. Another impact, or another interesting thing, is that same kind of international incident occurs. We have, one of our shippers has a vessel in route. Josh, Purdue's loaded one, or Cargill's loaded one. We put a tariff on, we do something with a foreign country doesn't like. When it was loaded, Ken, Grain Inspection Service certified it, they fumigated it, arrived within the allowable time for that fumigation to still be valid. We do something we don't like, wait a minute, that cargo can't discharge. It's got bugs in it. That's the imaginary bug, but one bug, that cargo either gets rejected or you start negotiating price. And that's, you don't want to own 55,000 tons of soybeans in China with the guy saying it's got bugs in it. That's a bad place to be.